would you be without me, Prime?
MoringMark. One of the most fascinating people to honestly ever be. Because on the one hand, you have a person who constantly makes comics daily, has constantly been giving a lot of fandom so many comics for many years and many ideas and new characters that they become attached to. And a lot of the time people consider his comics canon because that's how good they are to those people. To many people, they wish they could have Mark in their fandoms because that way they could have their own comics and have Mark constantly give them something. If Mark's interested in your show, you will be at least given something daily every day. But on the other hand, Mark has been known by some people to overshadow smaller creators and, well, making people believe that his comics are canon when in reality they aren't. People will worship Mark when in reality he's just the guy making comics daily. This video is meant to be a sort of deep dive on Mark's history. I try and go as much deep into it as I can because I don't think a lot of the newer Mark fans know about Mark's past. Because there's just so much to talk about with this guy. So much that some people don't really understand. It's really cool to have someone make comics for you daily. Genuinely speaking, it is. This isn't meant to be a roast or a criticism of Mark, but it also isn't meant to be glazing him up. I will criticize when I feel like it needs to be criticized, and I will be honest when I feel like it needs to be honest. So let's start at the beginning of Mark's career. Early on in Mark's career, we can probably say that the beginning time of Mark's first ever posts was August 16th, 2012, when he made his first post. Not his first comic. His first comic done in his style would be on August 30th, 2012, a Gravity Falls comic. The Gravity Falls comics for Mark are very interesting, actually, as they don't really go as crazy as when Mark gets into the other shows and stories that he does around this time. And also, the big thing about Mark, no daily comics. Yes, there were frequent comics and frequent art posts, but there's nothing you would say and point to and say, yep, that is a Mark comic. However, I'm going to say this right now. Mark at the time shipped One Dip. And this isn't a video meant to call out Mark because he's obviously learned and he's no longer doing this anymore. But he used to ship it, and I just have to let you know right now for anyone that wants to revisit these comics or see these comics. Because, yeah, it's just there, honestly. To be honest with you. And I can't ignore it and tell you it's going to be okay. Because it's not. It's not really going to be okay. You have to know it's there. He did, and let's just say he's learned from his mistakes. Of course, Mark wouldn't constantly post. He'd just post whenever he did. There was a big gap between November 2012 and March of 2003. So, yeah, needless to say, Mark posted whenever he wanted to around this time. Sometimes we get really good art, and other times we get, well, whatever you'd call this, honestly. So, needless to say, there's a lot to talk about. He also did a fanfic, actually. Yeah, he wrote a One Dip fanfic on June 27th, 2013. Jesus, wow. So, needless to say, this is the start of early Mark, but not the Mark we know. Mark made comics whenever he would make them, if that makes sense. We wouldn't start getting daily Mark, at least the Mark daily we know of, until we would get to August 2014, where we started getting daily Mark. And the first appearance of, well, you know, one of Mark's greater fandoms that he helped. August 16th, 2014 was the introduction of Starverses in the Mark series. I will cover this later, but just know that this is where it started in between Gravity Falls stuff. Mark was mostly focused on Gravity Falls stuff at this time, but eventually it would reverse and Mark would focus on Starverses, leaving Gravity Falls sort of die off. The last official comic that Mark would consider as a Gravity Falls comic would be on April 30th, 2017, the final final Gravity Falls comic that Mark will tag. Yes, I'm aware Mark did make one before with all the other shows he was doing, but I don't count that, and neither does Mark. So, yeah, that was it for the fandom, at least for Gravity Falls. And I always find it kind of weird Mark never came back. Honestly, that he never came back to do Book of Bill comics. But I guess it goes to show that Mark kind of moved on from this fandom, honestly. It's a trend that just is going to happen in the future. I'm sorry I didn't speak much about the Gravity Falls segment, but there's not much to really talk about here in terms of this section, because what can I say? There's no AUs, nothing crazy. Funny stuff like, Dipper, doing jazz hands with Groot, but that's all I can really say, honestly. Nothing I would consider to be giant long stories that span multiple comics that we know of that happened. And it's not much I can really say about that. So let's just, move on to, I guess, Mark's longest running series.
Which we used to.
October 3rd, 2016 is what I would consider to be the moment where Starverses starts to take over for Mark. You can sort of tell that Mark kind of got burnt out from doing Gravity Falls comics, even though they weren't as daily or frequent as other comics. And while there were little breaks in between, I genuinely wouldn't say Mark stopped doing Gravity Falls comics. That was his main focus. And yeah, he just did a lot of Starverses comics. Every once in a while, he might have done a sort of Gravity Falls thing, like this one comic with Tom and Bill fighting each other. But aside from that, there's nothing I could really look at and say, alrighty then, here we go. But I consider Starverses to be the point where Mark becomes modern Mark that we know of today. Daily comics would be constant and a thing that would be very common with Mark at this point. And it's also the start of the AUs. Holy shit, the AUs. Ay. Alright, let's get this out the way right now. The AUs are going to take up most of this video section right now. Yeah, there's a lot of AUs to cover. And Starverses was the beginning of AUs. Mark is the king of starting his own AUs, but he's also the king of not finishing a lot of his AUs. Yeah, I'm going to be real with you. Mark does not finish a lot of his AUs. The ones that he does finish, we value those. But aside from that, Mark never finishes these AUs. So let's start with the first ever AU. The one that started it all. The one that went on the longest. And the one that never got to finish. Which is kind of tragic.
She's a god!
November 19, 2016. The beginning of the ShipWars AU. Mark's longest running AU, and I'm standing by that currently because it's by far the longest one, with 83 comics made for the story alone and not counting any other art or comics. Holy shit, this one's just long as fuck. No amount of words can describe the beginning of this. So what the fuck's a ShipWars AU? So, well, as Mark puts it in the description, it's a literal ship war between Jarko, Jarko's kid and StarCo's kid. If you have not seen Starverses, Jarko is Jackie and Marco's kid. Yeah, I had to look that up. Oh my god. And StarCo is Star and Marco's kid. They both come from separate timelines, and they're here to make sure that their timeline is preserved. So, because if that timeline dies, they're dead too. So, yeah. A lot's going on in this one. There's a Glossaric with two heads splitting timelines. The best way to describe this AU is pretty much like Trunks going back in time in Dragon Ball, where he's going back in time to make sure that the Z Fighters have a chance to survive the androids. Well, like Trunks, them going back in time fucks up a lot of shit. A good example would sort of be that since technically speaking, Elizabeth, the StarCo kid, knows about what happens because they come from the canon timeline. Well, they sort of know that Ludo has the wand and they stop him. But in turn of stopping Ludo from getting the wand, Toffee then possesses Queen Butterfly, and now they're facing a stronger opponent, i.e. like the androids from Trunks' timeline. It's genuinely a long one, and it starts off very slow with them trying to get used to and trying to hide. Again, Elizabeth is a StarCo kid, and, well, Jam is the Jarko kid. And according to Mark, his name is Jam, which means Jackie and Marco, because, well, there's no time for naming kids when there's an apocalypse happening. Yeah, so needless to say, definitely the first AU and the longest one as well. It was also the one that lasted the longest of the Star universe. Yeah, this one officially died on October 14, 2020. This was around the time where Mark started focusing on another fandom. And, well, Mark eventually lost interest in Star Versus. Just like with Gravity Falls. A sad fate, but it was bound to happen eventually. With the amount of times Mark was making this comic, keep in mind that it ended in 2020, if that makes sense. And this started in 2016. Yeah, 4 years of making comics daily, especially Star Comics, can drain a guy. And I don't blame Mark for doing this. Definitely one of his smarter moves. I think. Don't quote me on that. But also a bit sad because, yeah, this AU died. It was the last Star AU to die. But it was also the longest running one and the first one. Kind of sad. But every single Star AU and Star comic, except one, I would count as dead. They aren't coming back. Mark has stated before that he's sort of been burnt out from the series, and we're not seeing any more Star comics. It's best to get this out the way now, because I don't think Mark ever wants to come back to the series. At least not now, especially with the other series that Mark is focusing on right now. So let's just move on to the next AU that Mark did around this time. The Citadel of StarCo. Yes, I'm aware this is a ripoff of the Citadel of Ricks, but I'm just going to be honest, genuinely speaking, this is Mark's coolest idea based on what he does with it, honestly. Yes, Citadel of StarCo is pretty much a comic series where Mark unites a bunch of StarCo kids, and I think it's one of Mark's coolest concepts ever, even though it really is just the Citadel of Ricks. What makes it cool is the fact that Mark collaborated with a lot of the artists, used their kids, and made them in his style. And, well, just honestly collaborated with them. Anytime someone made a comic with it, it was canon. And I still think that's kind of cool that Mark will make a reply comic to that person, honestly. I still think this is one of Mark's coolest ideas that also died. I'm not joking when I say that it is common for Mark to not finish comics. Oh my god. Okay, so this one does have an overarching story. So what's the haps? Well, here's what we know. As far as we know, the Citadel is under attack by these crystal guys, and it's up to them to defend the ship. And yeah, that's where it ends, honestly. Yes, I'm aware more happens, like, a unification speech, Elizabeth being the one to lead everyone. But I mean, that's all there is to it, honestly. Yes, again, I genuinely think you should check these out and check out the hashtag for it on Tumblr. But oh my god, just a great idea for Mark, and I just think it's one of the best things ever. It's a shame no other fandom has done this type of thing, or if they have, it hasn't been popular enough like Mark's to honestly catch traction. But genuinely speaking, really, really good idea in my opinion that more people should probably do and read this one. Again, what makes it cool is just Mark responding to people when they made something regarding it, and it continued the storyline. And there was no bad thing as a bad idea for this series. There's literally one where it's just a pirate ship full of crack ships from Star Versus and other shows. Like, I mean, come on. That's kind of a cool idea, Again, kind of a shame this one died as well. But, well, what can you do about it, honestly? Yep, our next AU is Echoes Creek. Yep, this is another one that just dies. It's kind of sad again because this is an interesting one where it's a future comic, but we don't follow any like Star or Marco. We follow Mariposa and Mitora. It's been a while since I've seen this show. I'm sorry for any Star fans watching this. Oh my god, Jesus Christ. Another one that got very long in, if we really want to start adding the chapters, I think this is up there with with the ShipWars AU, but just like the ShipWars AU, it also died. Yeah, it died like on August 8th of 2020. Yeah, it just ended there. Once again, Mark did not make a single continuation for this one either. It ends with Ludo having an apple in his mouth. That's it. It ends there. Again, there's like 4 chapters, with chapter 4 being incomplete, honestly. This one's also not coming back either. I think it's a cute concept to focus on Mariposa and this kid, but honestly, there's not much else I can realistically say about this comic. Yes, in the show they had a nice episode where they had a nice bond, but it's also the same episode where Star is lusting over Marco. Adult Marco, which is not a good look for the show. Holy shit. Again, Echo Creek is another incomplete one. We're like 3-0 for incomplete Mark AUs. I hope we can at least get a complete Mark AU coming up soon, right? Right? Queens. Yeah, this is another one. I'm counting this one even though it has no page. Queens is pretty much about us following all the queens of the previous eras, as in all the way up to Eclipsa. Them hanging out friend style, if that makes sense. So, this is a nice little AU, honestly. I have nothing against it. It's very nice and very good. It's still a series. Mark didn't complete it. This one started on June 7th of 2019. I hope you're starting to notice a pattern with Mark AUs. They're never really going to be finished. And it's hard to tell if I should start blaming Mark for these, or it's just, it is what it is. That's the best way I can describe it. It is what it is. The last official one also ended in June as well, which was just June 29th, 2019. Yeah, this one just ended as well. They might have been one-off, but it's still a series that I have to sort of count because it still was an ongoing series that Mark made. So congratulations, Mark. Another series down. We're 4-0. If there's any AU, on my knees, begging any AU that that Mark would finish, that would be so awesome. It would be so cool even. So let's just hope we get something here. September 25th, 2019. The premiere of Tom versus Jannanigans. Jannanigans? Yeah, Jannanigans. Finally, the first complete Mark AU / comic series. And I think it's a really good one, honestly. Now, I know, again, this is sort of going to be like the, like the other show where you can't count this as canon and people will be upset if you do. But at the same time, though, it's kind of nice to have a comic like this made, and it feels very official. I'm not saying it is, but it's kind of nice, honestly, to have a nice comic like this stick around. Honestly, focusing on Jana and Tom and their bonding relationship, honestly. This is also the longest one as well. Well, not really, but it's still very long with multiple chapters. It's just very nice to have a nice finished AU yet. This was, like the other shows, other AU that Mark also finished. Genuinely speaking, I'm kind of glad this one got made with multiple chapters and just a very solid conclusion, in my opinion, that it feels like you could count this as canon. And that's saying something, unlike the other show, which I don't really want to count that one as canon. But yeah, honestly, very good job with this one. And now we go back to Mark's streak of not finishing AUs. I'm still not over this. Now, I kind of want to focus a segment on this right now before we go to, the next AU. Mark never really finishes these, honestly, and it kind of upsets me. I get why for some burnt out, but also a lot of stuff did happen with Mark, For example, Mark wanted to focus on other projects, which I will focus on later in this video. But also, stuff happens in life. Mark lost his dad a while back, actually, in 2017. Which, understandable, I don't really know how else to put it, but that happened. So, I'm sorry if it's something I'm dragging on Mark, but it's just kind of funny how Mark never really finishes these, at least to me, It's just very, very funny. Alright, let's just move on. Not to the next AU, but to the sort of side projects that Mark has done before we get to the show. Mark has done other side projects, and I'm going to talk about them here because it feels necessary to talk about everything Mark has done. Mark has done a lot of comics for a lot of other cartoons. Phineas and Ferb, Milo's Murphy's Law, Among Us, Zelda, Doom Guy's in one of these guys' comics, believe it or not. So I guess Mark was trying to test the waters as well. He made a Big City Greens comic in 2018 before he made an Owl House one. So once again, Big City Greens fans are winning. He also made a Molly McGee one. Again, a lot of these are sort of one-offs and one-shots and not really something that you would really focus on from our comic. I have a personal theory that Mark was testing the waters to see what would work. And a lot of it didn't really stick. But he does find one that sticks, and we'll get to it. I just kind of want to shout out all these works because, again, Mark has really studied these stuff very well and sort of gets the style the show down or the media is trying to copy, if not take his own spin on it. Which I think is really cool, actually. You know, it's very nice to see Mark experiment with different styles. And this segues me into the theory that Mark isn't one person. He is one person. And Mark has experimented with different art styles multiple times, even in, Gravity Falls. Sometimes they've been very successful and I think are a different way to see the comic. And other times, they're an attempt. I'm not saying they're a good one. So needless to say, I genuinely think that Mark is still one person doing this. We know a lot about his process based on, they asked me anything that happened 10 years ago, Jesus Christ, where he does have some time to make some comics. We know some things about Mark, such as he comes from Hong Kong because of his DeviantArt. He has it right there. And yeah, honestly, it's very interesting to learn about Mark. But let's get to the big ones before we get to the other ones. We talked about the small stuff, and we're going to get to the big one. The one most Mark fans know about. However, I want to focus on Mark's other things as well. Things that many people don't know about Mark because they only know about the fan art side. Starting with, fun fact, Mark had a Patreon. Yeah, this is something I don't think a lot of fans really know about. Now, here's the thing though. And I'm kind of surprised a lot of people don't know about this. So, Spark Twins was the Patreon. Mark collaborated with another artist, which I'll put their name here because I'm not even going to try to pronounce that because I'm bad at pronouncing stuff, as we've seen before. But, yeah, now granted the Patreon is, not active anymore. There's been no updates to it. I don't know what happened with this. And personally, I don't want to ask Mark about this. Because, if I ask Mark questions, I'd feel like I'd have to interview Mark and talk about him in a personal light. Not personal, but, a positive light. And I kind of want it to be as neutral as possible. Even though it seems like I'm kind of dunking on Mark, I really do appreciate all the stuff Mark does. Again, making a comic daily, every single day for the past few years, and at least making it of good quality, that's something you have to kind of respect for Mark, honestly. And I don't think a lot of people really respect the process of that. Listen, you may think that the writing is bad and that, it's not as good as it should be. But for making a comic every day, I think they're of good quality. I mean, you try doing it, Bubby, and let's see what happens. Just saying. I'm just saying no one's done it. So, yeah. Spark Twins is still there, and there's no content that feels locked behind the Patreon because Mark did it in an interesting way where around that time, Mark needed money. So he made the Patreon with the other user. And essentially speaking, Mark would technically still post daily, but some of the posts would be on Patreon only. Which I still think was a really cool and unique idea, honestly. It's still daily comics, and you'll get the comics still. It's why there's a lot of gaps. Mark technically posted daily around this time, but, it doesn't really exist anymore. They also had a live stream, which there is no VOD for, and also no audio for Mark, as according to him. So, yeah, needless to say, it was such an interesting time, and I'm just going to say it now. No one blame me for this if this happens. I don't want to get blamed for this, but Mark, you could totally make a Patreon, and I feel like people would pay you for your comics, or definitely do that. Have a coffee open. People would pay you for that, honestly. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mark has a job. He doesn't need it, but damn it. I mean, he could totally get away with it now. And I know a lot of people might say he shouldn't do that, but he could totally get away with it. Again, Spark Twins is a dead Patreon. Not much there to really explore, but kind of cool Mark had a Patreon. But let's talk about Mark's personal projects. Stuff that was original to Mark. Starting with Tricks and Illusions is, I consider it to be the first original Mark content and stuff. It's not the one I think a lot of people know and got hyped up of, but it definitely existed. And just like many, many Mark projects, this one went, I wouldn't say unfinished, but like, kind of just forgotten to in time. It was around this time where Mark finally started focusing more on the ShipWars AU. So the nice little comics we got just kind of came and happened. This was a collaboration, once again, with said artist of Spark Twins. This name. Again, I'm sorry. I'm going to butcher it, and I don't want to do that. It took me forever to say MoringMark right instead of MoringMark. Do not say MoringMark. The fandom will find you dead by daylight. So don't. But this one just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth, at least on the Mark Patreon side. It's gone. It's gone. Yeah. So, honestly, there's not much to say about it. The last sort of official post was on March 21st, 2017. It lasted a while, but not enough to make an impact. And I wouldn't say it was one of Mark's longest running ones or one he was very, very hyped about. The one he did hype about, though, was one we're going to get into. Aim for the Stars is the one Mark hyped up as. It's sort of like, hey, I made these comics. We should honestly really, really talk about these. And he wanted to make his own series, Aim for the Stars. And just like many AUs and just like other series of his, say it with me now, Mark didn't continue the series. However, I think this one is kind of the one I think Mark really did. Again, he sort of did what he did with the Citadel of StarCo and continued upon it, in my opinion, which I still think is one of the greatest things ever. Someone would submit an idea, Mark would say that's, hey, that's canon, and make a comic about it. Genuinely, I love it when Mark does this. I understand why Mark doesn't do it now, but honest to God, just an amazing thing that Mark did, and I still really like that idea. A shame that Mark will never really come back to this, because I really like his characters and the concept as well. Really check out Aim for the Stars for yourself. Yes, it's discontinued, but this is what I consider to be Mark's most original thing yet. I know there's another one with the sheep, but that doesn't feel like Mark's thing, even though it's on his Twitter header. I don't count that. But, well, I've been avoiding it for far too long. There's nothing else I could really talk about or avoid anymore. I've constantly mentioned it, the show. But, let's start. The Owl House. Yeah, this is Mark's current fandom. It's also the one that pretty much made Mark kind of stop doing Star Comics. Okay, before I say anything, I gotta say it now. I have a theory that Mark did not watch the show, at least in the beginning of his comics. Like, he's seen clips of the show, he's seen what the fandom said, but I don't think he watched the show until later on. You can see it with Amity's outfits. He went for the beta design because the beta design was around popular in that time. He finally did get to watch the show and finally did it, justice. But again, kind of weird that Mark would do that. Not really something I genuinely think, was kind of cool. But that's Mark for you. And just like the Star one, there's multiple AUs for this. Holy shit. Oh my God, Mark. Why? And just like with Star, there's multiple ones that are dead. Well, were dead until Mark decided to update them. It's almost like Mark knew I was making this video and just said, let's bring some of these back to life. All right, baby. Are you ready for more AUs? No? Too bad. I have to talk about them. Here we go. Which Among Humans is the first Owl House Mark AU that he made. It uses the beta designs of the characters, and, well, the ones we have for the characters anyways, the main trio, which was Luz, Amity, and Willow, and it started on January 21st, 2021. This was one where I'm like, well, it's dead, you know? The main premise of this one was that it's kind of a switch where Luz is a witch and she's in the human realm, and people are sort of trying to hunt her down. I mean, it was an interesting concept, and Mark could have continued it, but, well, I considered it dead. I mean, to give you a basic idea, the last time this comic was updated for a while, was June 6th of 2014. And then I was going to proclaim it dead, but the Mark came back on November 21st of 2024 while I was writing the script, and then just made a sequel to the comic, which I kind of consider this AU dead, but Mark said, no, let me revitalize this AU. Mark, if you're watching this, continue this one, please. I think it's a cool concept. You probably will continue it, which is kind of sad. But also, I mean, before the 2014 updates, I considered it dead because it's like the last one before the June of 2014 was on May 15th, 2021. Mark just left this AU to die, and it's kind of frustrating to do this. So, yeah, I consider this one dead, but Mark bought it back, and it might come back. I'm giving Mark a year. I'm giving Mark a year to update this one again. If it's not, it's going back on the dead list, Mark. So, you know, update your comics whenever you can, Mark. You have your chance. Oh, my God. I should also use this one before we get to the next AU to talk about Mark making Reddit exclusive comics. Yeah, Mark's hanging out on the Owl House subreddit, and there's a lot of exclusive comics there. Some of them I think are really cool, actually, like the one where there's, you know, like the two girls that like each other. I think that was a really cute and wholesome comic that, if it weren't for the Owl House comic, like the Owl House part, feels like a really good comic that Mark made, and I think a lot of people should see that comic. Genuinely a really good one, actually. Let's move on to the next AU. So I'm counting this next one because it technically has an entry, and Mark once again updated it. Oh boy, the Actor AU. And I'm counting it because Mark updated it. Oh my God. Every time I think to myself, yeah, you know, this AU's dead. I don't think Mark's going to bring it back. Mark says, psych, I'm going to bring it back. It came back recently, like this month, actually. So, you know, December. So, thank you, Mark, for bringing back this AU. Yeah, needless to say, I don't hate this AU. But also, like, why, Mark? Why? Of all the AUs to bring back. Curious. Yeah, it's just a classic Actor AU. There's nothing that could really make me feel like this is a really cool and awesome concept. It's very simple, but it's not one I just get excited about, and it's not Mark's most interesting one. Yeah, I'm sorry to any and all fans that expected me to hype this one up, to like the three of you out there that like the Actor AU, but it's just there. Not much I can say. I'm just gonna, like, you know, move on from this one because it happened, and that's all I can really say. It happened. Moving on. A Little Hint of Blue. This was Tom vs. Jannanigans, but for the Owl House fandom. And I think Tom vs. Jannanigans is better. I'm sorry for saying that, but that's just what I think. You know, don't get me wrong, this is still a good comic, but, well, this is another one where you could definitely treat it as canon. Also, I can't take the cover seriously that Mark made for A Little Hint of Blue because it looks like Sonic Adventure 2. I finally found it. But once again, it's another, you know, 6-chapter one. Not as long as Mark's longest long in AU, but it's also a finished one. Yep, this is the other finished one that Mark has made. And listen, I know someone's going to count the next AU that I bring up as technically as finished parts. No, the fuck it doesn't. It's an ongoing story with multiple characters, which we'll get to. Oh boy, we'll get to that one soon. Yeah, but A Little Hint of Blue is very nice. I genuinely think it's a good comic. If it's canon or not, I don't know. And I have this crazy theory that I genuinely believe that Mark is responsible for, like, at most 70% of Scarra and Viney fans, because there was no way that every single one of you guys existed before Mark made the comic. I refuse to believe that. And to prove it, I actually do have a nice list of people here on this subreddit right here. This post right here is a post that asks if people will ship the ship. And a lot of people here agree. I'm not going to list all their names because I would take forever to do that. But they existed. And I don't want to negate the fact that these guys existed beforehand. These guys on this who said they ship it, this post happened 2 years before the comic started, which happened in 2013. This post happened in 2021. So these guys are, some of these guys here are some of the OGs. Shout outs to them. And shout outs to anyone who shipped it before Mark made this comic. Honest to God, you guys are actually OGs. But it's time to move on to, I think, another AU that happened. I think the most controversial one, depending on who you ask. It's hard to really name this AU. Owl House Future. I know Mark has a name for it. Growing Pains is a name. It's technically an ongoing multiple series one with multiple storylines. It's hard for me to really give it a name. I'm just going to call it Owl House Future. This one follows a lot of the fan kids. And yeah, let's get this out the way right now. AZ is the Luzinamity kid. And, well, AZ is a controversial character. Not everyone likes AZ, and some people like AZ. A lot of people think AZ is a lazy idea, if that makes sense. Not lazy, but it's just, you know, some people think that AZ is just loose too. Nothing interesting about AZ. There's nothing I can really say about her. And that goes for the other characters. And it's not that they're boring. It's just that they aren't as fun as other fan characters, in my opinion. Or other fan kids. I know a lot of people have their sort of thoughts on AZ and don't think AZ is a character. A very mixed character. You either like AZ or you hate AZ. And I mean, Mark slowly distances himself away from any AZ comics for a while. But that was also because there was an incident that happened on September 11th, 2014, where Mark posted a comic about an airship crashing. And he posted it on, well, September 11th. Now, again, we have established that Mark's from Hong Kong. He doesn't know about, you know, what certain things. So to blame Mark and say, you should have known better, Mark, again, he doesn't know how big of a deal it is. He even said so in the comment section of the Reddit where people called him out on it. Which I think is a really good thing for Mark to do. And I think Mark has made multiple mistakes. Like I said, I've mentioned, you know, how he should wend dip. He's learned from that. He also made a comic where, you know, Gideon dropped the soap in prison. He deleted that comic and has learned from that mistake as well. It just goes to show Mark is human. And just like many people, he'll mess up. And I think that's okay, you know? A lot of the time, mistakes happen. And we as people learn from them and try not to do them again. And honestly, that's kind of a good thing on Mark. But going back to his human AU, not human AU, his sort of, you know, AZ AU, I'm personally mixed on it. I personally don't like AZ, but I like the stuff Mark does with AZ sometimes. A very mixed character for me indeed, because I do like the Grom Factor one. Honestly, a very good one. But that's all I can really say about it. You know, it's interesting, but not something that I feel like is really, really cool or that should be elaborated upon. Because, I mean, it happened, you know? All I can really say, honestly. Again, I'm sorry that there's not much to really say about this one. It's just so long and ongoing, and it's still going on. It's not dead. So I count it as an ongoing comic, not one that's dead. He's still continuing it. He's just taking a break to focus on other AUs. And before we get to his most current AU, which has the most interesting thing, let's talk about his sort of final Owl House AU that's happening right now. Starting with... So, the Hexside Squad is another one. It's one with an ongoing story, happened, you know, in a sort of future thing. I don't have much else to say about it. It's just the Hexside kids going on a mission to save Gus. Because, well, a Golden Guard old is trying to capture Gus. Again, it's there. honestly. I don't have much to realistically say about it. Not because it's bad, but it's just there. Again, this one's also been on hiatus for a while. Mark might update it if I do this video. He might not. But, well, it's there, honestly. It's just, everyone going to go save Gus. That's where we are at the moment in this comic. But not much I can really say about it. And now we get to the big one. The current Mark Owlhouse AU. The Luzifer AU. Get it, Luzifer? Haha, the devil? Yes. Genius pun, Mark. You win the pun award for such a brilliant name. So, here's the thing about this one. It kind of starts off as, haha, Luz is bad. All the characters that are good are bad. It's the opposite, kiddos. Wow. And it seems like it's going to be a relatively, simple AU. Mark's been focusing on it. And then it happens. Mark decides to create 2 separate timelines for this one. Originally, I thought when I saw this, haha, it's an alt ending. Classic Mark making an alternate ending. Oh, silly Mark. And then it wasn't. It's 2 separate timelines now. So we have 2 of them, and I'm naming them because Mark has not named these 2 separate timelines. So on timeline A, we have the spare route, where Luz spares Hunter. The spare route is exclusive to Tumblr and Instagram, if that makes sense. Are exclusive to Tumblr and Instagram, and they're about Luz sparing Hunter. And the second plot and the second timeline is the killed route, where Luz kills Hunter in quotation marks. Spoiler alert, he's still alive. And this is exclusive to the Twitter, I'm not calling it X, I refuse to call it X, and Reddit websites. Again, 2 different timelines. And it's hard to tell which one's the canon one because Mark has not stated which one's canon. It's also one where we have a lot more notes of, actually. Mark on the Owl House Discord server and Reddit has shared a lot of his thoughts on some of the comics. Very interesting stuff, in my opinion. It's stuff that allows me to honestly research more. But there's some stuff here. There is no Odalia in this AU because Mark refuses to make a good Odalia. And there's no Camilla because he refuses to make a good Camilla. Well, a bad Camilla, for lack of a better term. So she's dead in this AU, and so is Odalia. It's such an interesting AU concept because we never seen Mark do a separate timeline path. It's kind of crazy. I don't know which one's canon, and I don't know which one Mark's going to confirm canon. So for now, it's just a timeline split. You pick the timeline that's canon, and so Mark said it's canon.
Finishing this fight.
I was saving this one for last because it's dead, but it also allows me to talk about fan projects and stuff fans have been doing for Mark, honestly. So, A Twist in Time is a comic that Mark made regarding a timeline where Luz didn't exist, and Luz goes back in time to that timeline to fix that timeline. Mark was supposed to continue it, but he didn't. But here's the thing, someone finished the fight for him, or at least is finishing the fight. And I'm bringing this up to talk about the fandom works where people have honestly finished the fight for Mark, or finishing the fight where Mark couldn't continue. Shout outs to the following people, and check out their works as they're still updating them. Dr. Ake is continuing Witches Amongst Humans. Another person continuing Mark's works for Witch Among Humans is Gray137. They're continuing the fight as well. Their last update was October 3rd, 2014, but they're continuing the fight. And I'd also like to shout out the archivist PK2317, who's preserving Mark's works and making them much more organized. He definitely helped a lot in the organization of me researching, so shout outs to that guy as well. A lot of people are continuing the fight that Mark hasn't finished. And I like to shout out one more person because I'm taking this as the canon route for this. So let me explain this one. And this is a segment and it's branching off of Mark's, so it counts. So let's go. Yeah, someone made a Citadel of Lumity. But unlike the Mark one, no one's really contributing except this one person. So shout outs to Kujaro Jotu. I probably butchered your name very, very badly. But yes, they are continuing Mark's work. And yes, there have been comics where people do join the Citadel. But, well, unlike Mark's, where there was a lot of people, only like 2 people made a comic. However, it does give us at least what I consider to be a canonical explanation. It's not canon, but I mean, Mark is not going to explain what happened to the Citadel. The real life explanation is it died. But this guy gives us a good explanation, honestly, with his comic. The entire Citadel was just enveloped in a bright flash, what they call the cleavage. 25% were unaffected, nothing happened. Another 25% were just, altered, like they changed, which is a canonical explanation. And the other half just fucking died. Yeah, wow, damn. So, that happened. The cleave was just something that happened, and I'm accepting that as canon for that. Oh, but yeah, what? Yeah, I'm counting it as canon. Genuinely, I'm kind of glad that there's people continuing Mark's work and finishing this fight. But nothing else I can really say, honestly. Damn, that was a long video. And I recorded it. So, that's the history of Mark. Guy with so much history and so many comics made. Stuff that a lot of people don't even know. And I think the worst part about this video is that it's going to be faded away. No one's going to remember this. Because who would? Mark will still make comics no matter what. Right now, he's focusing on the Owl House. And eventually, Owl House fans, you have to understand, Mark is going to stop making Owl House comics. Just like how he stopped making comics for Star Versus, and just like he stopped making comics for Gravity Falls. Eventually, it's going to come to an end. I hope you guys enjoy this, because it's really big to have someone constantly make daily content. Yes, Mark's comics aren't perfect. Yes, there are a lot of flaws to them. Yes, counting them as canon and making people think they're canon is not a good thing. But let people have their fun. If someone wants to think AZ is canon, let them have their fun. That's their little headcanon. And if Mark somehow watches this video, I really am glad you're still making these comics, man. Your dedication to this craft is very impressive indeed. And I kind of hope you keep on doing this. Because even though I ragged on you in certain parts, it wasn't in ill intentions. I genuinely appreciate a lot of the work you do, because I can't do this. Make a comic every day, and especially fully colored and of good quality. That takes a lot of skill. Godspeed, MoringMark. Hope that a lot more people read your comics and read a lot of your past stuff, whether or not you want to. And hey, keep making what you do. Here's hoping that the next comic and the next AU is a finished one. See you guys on the flip side. And until then, stay safe. Have a good one.